Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Streamline English. I hope you are having a wonderful day. Get comfortable and take a slow breath in and out. Tonight, we travel far back in time, about 2,500 years. You don't need to understand every word. Just listen and follow the story with me. Imagine a baby, a tiny, newborn baby boy. And imagine that a powerful king has ordered that this baby must die. Why? Because of a dream. The king had a frightening dream that this child would one day grow up to take his throne. And so, to protect his power, the king commanded that the baby be killed. But the baby did not die. He was secretly saved and given to a humble shepherd and his wife far out in the countryside, to be raised as their own ordinary son. The little prince grew up among the sheep and the hills, with no idea of who he really was, or the royal blood in his veins. And that shepherd's boy would grow up to build the largest empire the world had ever seen, stretching across much of the known world. And, even more surprisingly, he would rule it not with cruelty, as so many conquerors did, but with a wisdom and a mercy that amazed the ancient world. How does a baby, marked for death, raised as a poor shepherd's son, become one of the greatest kings in all of history? His name was Cyrus, and this is his story. If you enjoy learning English through ancient stories like this, please subscribe to Streamline English. It really helps our little channel grow. Thank you, my friend. Our story begins around 2,500 years ago, in the ancient lands of the Middle East, in the region of Persia, part of what is now the country of Iran. In those days, the most powerful king of the region was troubled. According to the old story, this king had a strange and frightening dream. A dream that warned him that his own baby grandson would one day grow up to overthrow him and take his throne and his empire. The king was terrified. He loved his power more than anything, and he was determined to protect it. So when his grandson was born, he made a cruel and desperate decision. He ordered that the baby be taken away and killed, so that the dream could never come true. Now, my friend, I must pause here and be honest with you. This part of the story, the dream, the doomed baby, the shepherd, comes to us from very old legends, told and retold for thousands of years. Historians cannot be certain how much of it really happened. It may be partly true, partly story, but it is the famous tale that has been passed down, and it is a beautiful and meaningful one. So let us follow it and enjoy it, while remembering that the early parts are wrapped in legend. The baby was handed over to a trusted servant with the cruel order to leave him to die. But the servant could not bring himself to kill an innocent child, and so instead, he carried the baby to a shepherd who lived in the hills and gave the child to him and his wife to raise in secret as their own. And so the little prince, who was meant to die, lived and grew up as a humble shepherd's son. The boy grew up far from any palace, among the simple people of the countryside. He lived the life of a shepherd's child, out in the open air, among the animals, the hills, and the hard, honest work of country life. He did not know he was a prince. He believed he was just an ordinary boy, the son of a shepherd, and in many ways, this humble upbringing shaped him in a wonderful way. He grew up strong and capable and close to ordinary people. He understood the lives of common folk because he had lived as one of them. He was not raised soft and spoiled in a palace, surrounded by servants. He was raised in the real world, with real work and real people. This, perhaps, is part of why he would one day rule so differently from other kings. He had not forgotten what it was to be ordinary. He had not forgotten what it was to be small. But the boy was also remarkable. The old stories say that, even as a child playing with the other village boys, there was something kingly about him. In their childhood games, the other children would naturally choose him as their king, and he would lead them with such fairness and natural authority that the grown-ups began to notice. There was something about this shepherd's son that did not quite fit the simple life he was living. A greatness shone through, even before anyone knew the truth. And then one day, the secret of who he really was began to come to light. According to the legend, the boy's true identity was eventually discovered. The powerful king learned that his grandson, the baby he had ordered killed, was alive after all, living as a shepherd's son. You might think the king would try again to destroy the boy. But instead, as the years passed, the young man's royal blood and remarkable qualities could no longer be hidden or denied. Cyrus came to know who he truly was, not a shepherd's son at all, but a prince of royal blood with a claim to power. And here is where the legend and history begin to join together, because the grown Cyrus did exactly what the old dream had foretold. He rose up, he united the Persian people behind him, and he challenged the very king who had once ordered his death. The Persians, at this time, were not yet the great power they would become. They were ruled over by a larger, more powerful kingdom. But under Cyrus's leadership, the Persians rose up and overthrew their rulers. The prophecy of the dream came true. The boy who was meant to die took the throne of the empire. The shepherd's son had become a king. But this was only the beginning, because Cyrus was not content to rule one kingdom. He had a vision of something far, far greater. Once Cyrus had united the Persians and become their king, he set out on one of the most astonishing campaigns of conquest in all of ancient history. One by one, he conquered the great kingdoms around him. He defeated a famously wealthy kingdom to the west, whose king was said to be the richest man in the world. He marched against the most powerful and famous city of the ancient world, a vast, legendary city, and he took it. Kingdom after kingdom, land after land, fell under his rule. In a remarkably short time, Cyrus built an empire larger than anything the world had ever seen before. It stretched across an enormous distance from the edge of the Mediterranean Sea in the west, all the way toward the lands of India in the east. It contained many different peoples, many different languages, many different religions, all under one rule. It was at that time the largest empire in the history of the world. This alone would have made Cyrus famous forever, a brilliant general and a great conqueror. But it is not really the conquests that make Cyrus so beloved by history. It is how he treated the people he conquered, because in this, Cyrus did something almost unheard of in the ancient world. In the ancient world, conquerors were usually brutal. When a king conquered a new land, he would often destroy its temples, crush its customs, enslave or scatter its people, and force them to abandon their own gods and ways of life. Cruelty was the normal way of empire. But Cyrus did something different. When he conquered a new people, he did not try to destroy their way of life. Instead, he allowed them to keep their own customs, their own religions, and their own traditions. He respected the peoples he ruled. He let them worship their own gods and live in their own ways. He governed with a surprising amount of tolerance and respect, astonishing for his time. There is one famous example that has echoed through history. In the great city he conquered, there lived a people who had been brought there long before as captives, far from their homeland, longing to return. And Cyrus did something remarkable. He set them free. He allowed these exiled people to return to their own land and even to rebuild their holy temple. This act of mercy was so meaningful that it was written down and remembered, and it is still honored to this day in religious tradition. Because of all this, Cyrus became known not as a cruel destroyer, but as a wise, just, and merciful ruler. He showed the ancient world that an empire could be held together not only by fear and force, but by respect and good treatment. The peoples he ruled, in many cases, came to accept and even welcome his rule because he treated them with dignity. A famous ancient object connected to Cyrus, on which his words were recorded, is sometimes pointed to as one of the earliest expressions in history of respect for the rights and customs of different peoples. We must be careful not to read too much of our modern world into it. It was created in its own ancient time for its own purposes, but it remains a powerful symbol of a kind of leadership that was rare and remarkable for its age. Cyrus the Great ruled his vast empire until his death in battle around 2,500 years ago, and he left behind a legacy that has lasted ever since. In his homeland, he is remembered even now as a founding father, a hero of justice and greatness. And around the world, he is remembered as one of history's most unusual conquerors, the one who ruled with kindness. The story of Cyrus the Great gives us many things to think about, but two lessons shine most brightly. The first is about where we come from. Cyrus, in the legend, began as a humble shepherd's son, raised far from any palace, among ordinary people, and rather than holding him back, this humble beginning may have been the secret of his greatness. Because he knew the lives of ordinary people, he understood them, and he ruled them with respect. He did not forget what it was to be small, and so when he became great, he used his greatness kindly. The second lesson is about how we treat others, especially when we have power over them. Cyrus had more power than almost anyone in the world. He could have used it cruelly, as so many did. Instead, he chose respect, tolerance, and mercy, and it is precisely this, not the size of his empire, but the kindness of his rule, that has made the world remember and admire him for 2,500 years. True greatness is shown not in how much power you gain, but in how kindly you use it. So tonight, why do I tell you this story? Because Cyrus reminds us that where you start does not decide where you can go. A shepherd's son became the greatest king of his age, and whatever humble place you feel you are starting from, in your learning, in your life, it does not set a limit on what you can become. Your beginnings are not your ceiling. And there is a gentler lesson here too. As you grow, as your English grows, as your knowledge and your abilities grow, remember Cyrus. The truest mark of a person is not how much they achieve, but how kindly they treat others along the way. As you become more capable, stay kind. As you rise, lift others. That is the kind of greatness that the world remembers, and the kind that truly matters. So keep climbing, my friend, from whatever hillside you are standing on tonight, and keep your heart kind as you go. If this story inspired you, please give it a like and subscribe to Streamline English. It truly helps us grow. And tell me in the comments, do you think Cyrus was history's kindest conqueror or simply a very clever one? Until next time, my friend, keep rising, stay kind, and have a wonderful day.